Hello, my name is Ivan Wayne, a Voyager, and this is the second episode of Lantern, a video series bringing you psychology articles in 10 minutes or less. In this video, we'll be talking about the article, Where's Your Bum Brain? Humor, Social Understanding, and Sibling Relationship Quality in Early Childhood by Paine and colleagues, published just last year in 2020. Do you have a sibling, or two, or three? Well, if you do, I want you to consider something. Do you think that the amount of humor you share with your sibling or siblings impacts your relationship? And if so, in what manner? This is what Paine and colleagues were very curious to answer. So the study design primarily looked at three different things. First, the authors wanted to know how was humor production, so how many jokes did each child make to try to make the other one laugh, and how much humor appreciation was observed. So did the sibling laugh when the other person made a joke? The authors also looked at theory of mind, or how often a child referenced to some sort of internal state. You can kind of think of theory of mind as perspective taking, and interestingly in developmental psychology, we review that this comes online for most children somewhere between 4 and 5 years old. Imagine I ask you to draw a Q on your forehead. And while that might seem a little bit silly, and now all of a sudden you're questioning which way does the tail go on a Q, on a capital Q, it asks you to look into somebody else's perspective. So not the way that your eyes are seeing it, but reversing it. And how would someone looking at your forehead observe the Q that you draw? That kind of gets at theory of mind. It's when a child first realizes that we don't all have the same exact thoughts, that if I'm hungry, not everybody in the room is hungry. So the authors want to know, did theory of mind, or how often they reference their internal states, did that connect to how much they used humor or appreciated humor? And then lastly, they asked the sibling duos, how closely do you feel in your relationship with your sibling? Do you all fight a lot? Do you get along? The youngest child in the study was 3 and the oldest was 8, but most kids hovered right around 5 years old in the study. All the children included in the study came from 2-child households. So they didn't have 3, 4, 5 kids in the family, only 2. So here's how they ran the study. They entered the children's homes and they used a magnet task, a cooperative problem-solving game, to kind of get the kids acquainted with the researchers. And then what they did is they set up a couple of cameras and they let the kids play with a farm set toy that included buildings, vehicles, animals, etc., a bunch of different farm-style toys, and left them alone to their own devices for 15 minutes to see how would they play in an unstructured environment. One of the sort of debates in these methods is, will children be inclined to make a lot of jokes and use a lot of humor if they're not intentionally put in a situation that's prompting them to make jokes? And I guess that kind of gets at the spontaneity of humor and how warm and connected 2 siblings might feel towards one another to use humor in an unstructured environment. Then 2 raters would rate and observe all of the behavior that they saw in each of the videos, and they would talk about any discrepancies they had, and they looked at how many jokes were used, what were the reactions for each joke, whether child A or B tried to make the joke, how did the other sibling react, how many of those references to their internal state, were they displaying some sort of outward awareness of theory of mind, that I have a mental state and yours is different, so we don't always have to agree. And then afterwards, they asked the siblings and completed a set of questions about how close do you feel, how often do you fight, how well do you get along, and general feelings towards the other sibling. So what do they find? Before we get into the results, I first want to display the 7 different humor categories they tried to observe, used and appreciated between the 2 siblings. You'll notice across the 7 different types of humor, there is a great gambit of different types of jokes that these kids could have tried to make with one another while playing with a set of farm toys. And we'll get into each of these individually as they come up, more importantly. Additionally, when they're trying to observe the different references to an internal state of mind, how much theory of mind am I displaying, these are the types of things that they are looking for the child to be saying to one another. Anything that falls into these 8 categories might elicit some degree of theory of mind, showing that I am aware and sort of admitting that we have 2 different mental states at any given point. So, of the 7 different types of humor they tried to analyze, only 2 stuck out for connecting to a child's overall sense of theory of mind, and specifically their level of cognition. A child saying how they think, they know, they guess, pretending, and do you remember, etc. Right? This is illustrating to some degree, I know, that your brain holds different contents than mine. And the two different types of humor that correlated well with that is preposterous statements and anecdotes, so creating absurd stories or announcements or saying something that's absolute nonsense, or sound play. And this might sound somewhat naturally connected, right, to a set of farm toys, and might be making ridiculous noises to make a cow jump off the roof of a barn, or making a pig drive a tractor, and etc. So these two types of humor were correlated with more references to my own cognition and my siblings' cognition. However, this connection was moderated by the birth order. What the authors found is that the younger child, the second born, was more likely to make these types of jokes in order to try to make their older sibling laugh. And this connection to these references to my internal state, do you remember, and our different cognitive processes was only reliably found in the younger child. This is an interesting connection, that the order in which we're born and whether we have an older or a younger sibling might impact how much we reference to our own thought processes and the types of humor and how much humor we might try to use in order to make our older sibling laugh. It's pretty interesting. Additionally, the authors found that wordplay, or using nonsense words, intentionally saying the wrong thing, or making some sort of pun, right? This was connected with a higher rapport between siblings. So the more wordplay that was used between the two children, it related higher to more agreeableness, and we get along better. Which is interesting because of the 7 types of humor, this is the only one that was connected with a higher degree of friendliness and warmth between two siblings. I think that might say more about the other 6 types of humor than this one particular style of wordplay. On that same note, this particular style of humor, performing incongruities. So when I enact a conflict between what is normal or expected, like I said earlier, maybe making a pig drive a tractor or doing something that's ridiculous that wouldn't be realistic, this was actually connected with a lower degree of rapport between two siblings. So the children fought more often, and they did not rate themselves as being as close with their sibling if the two siblings were performing more incongruities in order to try to make each other laugh. What's interesting looking at this graph is that happened even more so if you were second born. So if you're the younger sibling and you're performing more incongruities to try to make your sibling laugh, it's going to lead possibly to a worse off relationship. Maybe the younger sibling in that case is getting on the older sibling's nerves, and the humor is actually backfiring. So at first, while it may seem that these results are exactly what the authors sought out to find, it's far from what they hypothesized. Of the 7 types of humor they observed, only 3 of those categories led to anything positive between siblings, regardless of whether it was the younger sibling making the joke or the older sibling. And then they actually found that 1 or 2 different types of humor led to worse outcomes between siblings. What I do really enjoy about this article is the authors bring to us an awareness that humor is just one central piece to how siblings get along, and it's going to impact their development. It's going to affect how they're attached to one another. The humor styles in the home is going to impact what they think is funny at school. It's going to have a profound, sort of maybe even very hidden, subtle underlying effect on their overall life trajectory. It may alter what they think of their parents or the types of media that they choose to consume when they get older. If you have siblings, what type of jokes do you share? What's your humor style with one another? Do you think your sibling's very funny? Do they think you're funny? And how do you think the references to your own state of mind, and admitting that your sibling is incredibly different than you in other times, how does that impact your overall closeness and the bond that you have with your sibling? The way we use humor and appreciate it, how we think of others' mindsets compared to our own, and the types of relationships we have with people in our household, including our sibling, impact us every single day. And we can't ignore these pieces when we consider who we are today and how we became who we are. So my name is Ivan Wayne of Voyager. This has been the 2nd episode of Lantern, bringing you psychology articles in 10 minutes or less, and I will be seeing you soon.